captured this afternoon, according to the US Marshals, according to the US Marshals Office. Antoine Massey, who has been known for making social media posts as he's been on the run. He was one of the 10 inmates who escaped from the Orleans Justice Center several weeks ago now. He and Derek Groves were the only two remaining still on the run. But this afternoon, we have learned at WWL Louisiana that Antoine Massey has been recaptured. We just got off the phone moments ago with the US Marshals Office. They confirmed to us here at WWL Louisiana that he is, in fact, back in custody, that he was taken back into custody in the Hollygrove neighborhood. And investigative reporter Mike Pearlstein is joining me on the set this afternoon. You just got off the phone with them. Tell me what else you know. This happened in Hollygrove, as I mentioned?
Right, in the 9400 block of Stroelitz, not far from the Costco on the way to Metairie Road. This was all within the past hour, so this is very fresh news and information. Antoine Massey was found inside of a residence. He was alone. According to Brian Fair of the US Marshal Service, he was captured without incident. In fact, he gave himself up once surrounded by law enforcement. This actually came from a CrimeStoppers tip, Katie. So we know that a $50,000 reward had been offered for some weeks now. They had been waiting on tips, in fact, pursuing some of them unsuccessfully until today. This tip panned out. Somebody will be collecting $50,000. It came through CrimeStoppers. Other agencies involved, the US Marshals were kind of leading the search, but instrumental and at this residence were representatives of the New Orleans Police Department, Louisiana State Police, US Marshals, of course, along with JPSO, not far from the Jefferson Parish border.
That's right on the line.
They assisted. Obviously, they were taking, no chances or risks with these this particular escaped inmate being considered potentially armed, potentially dangerous. But it ended peacefully. He's now back in custody. Obviously, he'll be facing a charge of escape in addition to the previous charges for which he was being held at the Orleans Justice Center of domestic violence that included rape.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this area that we were looking at on your screen, this is a map where that house is, where Antoine Massey, one of the Orleans Justice Center escapees, was taken back into custody. If you're just joining us, that happened just a few moments ago. This area is really not too far from Xavier University's campus, which may be a bit unnerving for some parents out there who may be watching this, to know that Antoine Massey was hiding out in a house right there, not that far from the Costco, where a lot of people frequent. Hundreds, thousands of people go through that Costco every day. And apparently Antoine Massey did not get far when they escaped from the Orleans Justice Center, and remember, all 10 of them.
It was kind of assumed in the case of Antoine Massey in particular that he may not have gone far. We saw that previously he posted a video of himself on social media that was identified as a house near the fairgrounds, which was promptly descended upon by the law enforcement agencies. He had not been there, so assumed that whenever he videotaped that, it was sometime earlier before he posted it. But that gave them an idea that he probably had not fled across state lines or anything further. What is interesting, we've seen in many of these other escapees, accomplices arrested, booked with accessory to the escape. Right now, no such other people known to be involved in helping him, assisting him. Nobody was at that house in that Hollygrove area when they descended upon it to make that arrest. He gave himself up peacefully. Now, of course, we'll see once they debrief Antoine Massey if he provides any additional information. He was considered, Katie, one of the masterminds of the escape.
We learned that, yes, through the fact that they've arrested several other people, and so that has given us a bit of a paper trail as we've continued to cover this.
And he's been perhaps the most visible by popping up on social media. There had been many tips generated about his whereabouts, including the one himself going on social media. They were able to, pinpoint a house there. It's, now almost 6 weeks since that escape. It is really considered remarkable that, Massey, up until today, and Derek Groves, the other escapees still at large, managed to stay out for so long with such a large reward being offered.
Apparently one tip is all it took.
That's right. And, that is always the kind of mystery of being a fugitive. How many people know of the whereabouts? Yes. Who did he trust? Well, apparently, I don't know if it was him letting his guard down or somebody deciding 50,000 was just too tempting to pass up. But it was, in fact, a CrimeStoppers tip. And Brian Fair, the spokesman for the US Marshals Service, said that reward will be collected by the tipster.
Yeah, well, obviously there's still a $50,000 reward for information out for Derek Groves. He's considered the other mastermind behind this operation. We do know that Groves had an ex-girlfriend who was actually an employee at the jail, correct?
Right. She was a guard.
And she was a guard at one point, has since been fired. However, that's the only person that we've known with ties to Groves. Now, if he and Massey were the two who coordinated this escape, there are going to be a lot of questions, asked and hopefully answered by Massey now that he's in custody.
And certainly the more that time passed from that May 16th escape, the more the law enforcement was operating on the theory that the escaped inmates had gone their separate ways. They were no longer, say, together in hiding. The last pair were the two arrested in Texas. They got the furthest of anyone we know so far. And they were together in a car, arrested by authorities in Texas. But everyone else had been arrested separately. Generally, if you're going to cover your tracks and remain in hiding, the fewer people that know, the better.
Sure.
Acting in concert with another person could also, put them in jeopardy of being caught.
Yes.
Massey was again caught in that 9400 block of Stroelitz and Hollygrove by himself in a residence. And that's generally, it's almost kind of on the edge of Lakeview on the way to Metairie Road. You could describe it as behind the Costco. A relatively peaceful residential neighborhood.
Yeah, not really Lakeview, but Uptown. It's closer to Hollygrove borders Uptown,
right.
And other areas like that. Now, just a few moments ago, you were looking at a booking photo for one of the plumbers who was working at the jail, who has been accused of helping these inmates escape. Now, that affidavit in his arrest is where we got a tremendous amount of information about how this breakout happened. And that's when we first learned that Massey and Groves may have been the two that were the ringleaders behind this, and that they had been working together, that they had confronted this plumber allegedly. Plumber now tells a different story through his attorney. So all of those details are going to play out in court. I think that's when we're finally going to figure out exactly what happened. But you would assume that the US Marshals Office, the NOPD, every law enforcement agency, Louisiana State Police, which Troop NOLA has been essential in all of this, that they are all questioning Massey, that they are going to try and get as much information out of him as possible about, number one, how this went down, and number two, where Derek Groves might be. And
you mentioned in the case of the Sterling Williams, the maintenance man at the jail who was arrested, and in fact, he was the first of the non-escapees, to be arrested as a helping or an accomplice.
Yes.
And the initial account, I'm glad you used the word allegedly, because that's now in some dispute by his own attorney. But his allegation that he told detectives at the time of his arrest was that he was threatened with a shank, a crude homemade prison knife, that under that threat, he turned off the water so that the inmates could crawl through a hole that they, I guess, punched through a wall of an empty cell behind a toilet and sink fixture. Later, once he got to court, his attorney gave a different account, that it was a matter of a plumbing issue and maintenance that led to him turning off the water. Even said he was not threatened with a shank by these two inmates. That's what the lawyer said in prison, in court, once Sterling Williams went to court. So this is definitely in dispute, not completely 100% fact at this point, but that is what law enforcement believed, and that is what was contained in that arrest affidavit. But we do know, obviously, Antoine Massey was vocal by, and obviously some risk there on going on social media,
Yes.
giving a lengthy account in which, as you recall, he said, I didn't escape, I was let out, led to obviously a whole nother sequence of questions as to who might have been involved. Obviously,
Yes.
Sterling Williams is facing the charges of aiding the escape. Were there others? The Attorney General's office is deep into a criminal investigation into whether there was other inside help. But by all accounts, Antoine Massey, he was vocal when he was on that tier prior to all of this. He was vocal when he popped up on that social media claiming innocence in the underlying charges that put him there, domestic violence, up to and including a rape charge, as well as the escape itself. Kind of hard to make that argument while a fugitive on the run when you're not where you're supposed to be in custody. But nevertheless, we heard it, he said it, I didn't escape, I was let out.
Yes.
So now let's see how this plays out. Antoine Massey has been captured. No more parlays, y'all. We got a winner, I guess. Derek's still out there. But Derek Groves, is it right? Yeah, he's still out there. But Antoine Massey has been caught. Subscribe, like, and share. See y'all on the next one.